Hello and welcome to the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast. I'm your host, Joel Harrison. As the title suggests, this podcast is a broad remit covering the evolving challenges associated with generating trust and influencing buyers in all areas of B2B. And these are perennially tough challenges, but they've taken on a new urgency and resonance in a changing landscape. Episodes are released weekly, so please don't forget to subscribe and like or rate the episode of podcast as is appropriate. So today's episode, we're going to explore the role of YouTube in B2B marketing with my guest, Katy Howell. And in this episode, you'll learn why YouTube deserves a bigger role in B2B marketing strategies, how to create content that works for audiences across mobile, desktop, and even TV screens, and practical ways to use YouTube for both brand building and for a platform for thought leadership. So as I say, Katy Howell's my guest today, and she's one of the foremost proponents and experts in the world of social media, influencer marketing, thought leadership, and many other things, much as herself. Katy, welcome. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Well, it's lovely to speak to you again. You've been on a guest in this podcast before, and you and I collaborate on lots of things, so really good to talk to you about this topic. Because recently, Ofcom, which is the UK's communications regulator, recently revealed that YouTube is the UK's second most popular content destination in the UK. That's second behind the BBC, right? So it's ahead of ITV and Channel 4 and all the streamers. So it's confirmed its place is, it might have been like a geeky platform once, but a place you went to see your kind of guilty pleasures of geeky stuff. That's where I treat it certainly as well. But it's increasingly, it's on mobile, it's on desktop, it's also on TV screens as well. And yet, despite its scale and reach, we don't think of it as one of the mainstream B2B channels, and many B2B brands haven't tapped into its full potential. So today we're going to dive into that. We're going to look at how businesses can harness it effectively, what best practice looks like for using video to build trust, authority, and influence. So a lot to talk about today, Katy. But I know we're gonna have a really interesting conversation, because we always do. So, do you agree then with my starting premise that YouTube deserves a bigger role in B2B marketing strategies, and why do you think that?
So yes, I do. I don't think YouTube is a nice to have anymore. It's mainstream, as you rightly said. With the Ofcom data. I mean, it's interesting that it's more watched than ITV in the UK. So, it's definitely taking a different place. And I do think probably the youngsters have made that change slightly more dramatic, as they tend to turn YouTube on the TVs, on our smart TVs, straight away. And I think parents and grandparents are seeing the use of that and how it's being used within the living room. And it's put YouTube into the mainstream. And I think that we know B2B buyers go there. There's a different behaviour, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that we'll see within YouTube. But I think you have to, as a B2B marketer, say YouTube is not niche anymore. It is primetime telly. And that means your thought leadership needs to play with the same kind of seriousness as news and documentaries.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it just seems like it's so... it's not just a channel in itself, it's a content world you're entering into with YouTube, isn't it? Whereas as you say, those buttons put it, perhaps if you're like me, a Gen Xer, you're used to having a remote control on your TV that has a series of numbers on it, not particular channels, and it's kind of really transcended that, hasn't it? It's gone completely mainstream. Now, and we kind of we're looking at when preparing for this, we're looking at the kind of link, looking at YouTube and what's its best comparison. I think LinkedIn is increasingly a kind of a competitor for it, and we did some analysis. I've shared before the show with Katy some analysis of kind of thought leadership categories, and we could see that 20% of B2B of entries in the B2B Marketing Awards, which is one of the biggest, or probably not the biggest UK marketing awards program for B2B in the world, over 20% use LinkedIn. Use YouTube, and of those, most of them are thought leadership. And there was actually a very strong parallel between people using YouTube. It was pipping LinkedIn to the post. They was more popular as a thought leadership destination. Are you surprised about that? Do you think the two things are going kind of hand in hand? There seem to be two sides of the same coin with regards to thought leadership.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. And in fact, it's actually been happening for quite some time, a couple of years. So, it's not the newest of things. It's just not everybody's been doing it. And I think the easiest way to look at this, Joel, is to think of LinkedIn as the distribution, the kind of the trust springboard. I'm making words up now. And YouTube as the kind of depth engine, for want of a better word, is the bit the bit that allows you to get really meaty. So without a doubt, one of the reasons LinkedIn works because as a trusted social platform is all the connections and the networks. So obviously that adds social proof and credibility and elements like that, but it's not really the kind of place where you will be changing opinions or getting people to really think in some depth about a topic, preferably a topic around your brand. And that is really where thought leadership can really champion that element within a longer program, for want of a better word.
Okay, so you perhaps you get you kind of LinkedIn is like the gateway drug in some respects.
Yes, exactly. You capture intent with polls and carousels. You recreate your shorts on there. You're really using it as the hook that gives them reasons to keep coming back to you, of course. And then the deeper conversation can happen within LinkedIn, within YouTube.
So you think it's almost like a continuum, right? It's not as if they're necessarily against each other. It's that one leads into the other one. I mean, I guess you can find brands and start a relationship with brands or organisations via YouTube, but it's just not. It's possibly not the kind of, I guess the navigation isn't as orientated towards that as perhaps it might be. LinkedIn is a personality and brand orientated platform, whereas other way around. LinkedIn's a personality and brand orientated platform, whereas YouTube is a channel orientated platform. So you're only going to look for the channel if it's perhaps harder to make that entry in, I guess is what you're saying.
Well, it's harder to be surfaced as a B2B brand. You can begin to, I mean, there is a key to YouTube that people don't really think about, and that is you need to think like a broadcaster. And in reality, most brands are really poor at this, and because they've been focused for the last 10-15 years on performance, they don't really think like a broadcaster. And I think that part of the challenge here is how to think like a broadcaster. What I mean by that is you should be looking at doing a series. You should be looking at programs like Newsnight or TV interviews or the business channels. Think CNN, CNBC, Reuters, all that kind of stuff. You need to be thinking in that line of episodic content. And that's really what you're beginning to do, so that you drive up subscriptions and you get people following you, because you're just, you're not doing something that's very consumer friendly, and so we'll miss out on being in the top rated blah blah blah. So it's not quite the same for B2B. So I think you have to work very hard at creating broadcast level programs.
Yeah, that is a mindset shift, isn't it? I mean, we look at what people are understanding with podcasts, and a lot of brands think podcasts are a nice idea, but they don't want to commit to them for partly because of those reasons you spoke about. But thinking like a broadcaster is, it feels like years ago we said that brands should think like journalists, but thinking like a broadcaster is a step on from that, right? It's a really big deal. And I guess that kind of content, broadcast content in that way, I mean, it doesn't work very well on LinkedIn. And no criticism of LinkedIn, but it's just not designed for that, right? It's, you have a limit on the length of content you can have on there.
And also, on LinkedIn, a face-to-face or a webinar like this works really well, right? It's great. But on YouTube, you can do the 3-camera kind of angles where you've got the long shot showing showing both of us, close-ups on each of us, and you're making cuts. You can do GVs, general views. You can kind of do that big studio swirl so that people get very drawn into the story. You can put results up on screen. You can run it as Q&As. You could run it as chapters that are working sessions that help somebody with, I don't know, integrating AI into your infrastructure, for instance, is not a one program type, but it might be a series by experts talking about dealing with AI within your infrastructure. Or you're going very deep into one topic, or you're thinking explainers, or even going so far as to taking people along the journey to the sales process, because they don't really want to they don't really want to talk to anybody till they're at the last level. So now you need to do objection handling, all of which sits around thought leadership.
Okay, all right, that's fascinating. So there's definitely different types of content that's kind of playing to their strength in these channels. So there's a Venn diagram, there's a small overlap, but as you talk about it, it sounds to me like it's less of an overlap rather than more, even though they are essentially allowing you both very focused on video increasingly. But one of the things about B2B and talking about thought leadership is that there's often a focus on individual thought leaders, versus perhaps a more strategic leadership program. To what extent does YouTube kind of shift that balance? Because I guess, as you said just now, LinkedIn's quite good at promoting the individual, whereas YouTube has the opportunity. I guess you can still promote that individual, but probably within a broader brand narrative. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. YouTube rewards programs. Yes, one face can spark the attention, but a chorus, the way to think it's a chorus of credible voices builds trust. So the way to think of it is your single voice, which is exciting and interesting on LinkedIn, and then this choir, to follow the analogy, this choir of people who are all experts in that field, building that trust value. It's about taking the story and the journey that you're taking your customer on to the next level. And I don't see there as, one of the things that people often do with social media is they treat them as very separate channels, and actually they are not. And anybody who's been on any channel and clicked on a video and found themselves on TikTok know that they're very interchangeable. And it's exactly the same on B2B, which is that we see that what you should be trying to create is an ecosystem around your thought leadership. It's not just about driving one person to talk endlessly about their opinions. It's an ecosystem that you're building from the ground up to build trust and to celebrate your talent within the organisation.
And that can look potentially quite intimidating from the outside, right? And that's one of the problems with channels people are uncomfortable with, or techniques, because they're like, oh gosh, that's hard, I can't do that, I'll just won't try. I mean, would you say, I mean, we don't want to get on to talk about practicality later on, but is it the case that you can only do it when you've got a fully fledged strategic integrated program with lots of people, or it's one of the things you've got to try? The sooner you start trying, the sooner you're going to learn, and the sooner you're going to get better.
Yeah, the latter. I mean, I've been in social for 21 years. I can promise you the amount of things we've just tried because you can it's the way social learns. Social is changing so fast. You could plan it to death and, 2 weeks later it's all changed. So I wouldn't bother. I'd say get on with it. Building a program is what you should be doing anyway, because memorability, repeatability. I noticed that Ritson is currently talking a lot about the fact that people keep changing their messaging. There's quite a lot on LinkedIn going on about that, and I'm in agreement. We need to stick to our knitting, and so creating a series of programs that might live as longer form on YouTube is a great way to dive deeply into a subject with your thought leaders, with your credibility, with your influencers, all of those kind of things. But the reality is that you want to then make the most of that content, that investment in taking time to write the stories you're going to write, to then recreate those as blogs, as Facebook posts, as LinkedIn posts, as shorts, as reels, as, blah, blah, blah. And you actually start to disperse across it and look at your network as a whole ecosystem to drive business growth.
Very interesting. One of the areas where there's a kind of a bit of a lack, people aren't universally agreed, is there's thought leadership and there's thought leaders is one area. So you have individuals who are doing kind of potentially random acts of content, but they're very visible, right? And they're thought leaders. And then there's often those things. Those are things that often form part of a broader marketing thought leadership program. But the other where there's some, and let's park that for a second. The other where there's a bit of kind of disparity or mixed opinions is around, a lot of people call everything that's content marketing thought leadership. and that includes kind of like quite generic mid-funnel or bottom of funnel content marketing activity, which is quite practical and quite run-of-the-mill and not really unique or differentiated. Do you think there's a home? I mean, obviously you can have, if you look at SaaS platforms, for example, they have a load of practical stuff on YouTube, really, really valuable. How do I use it? How do I get to do this? But do you think those two things, perhaps if you're trying to do both those things, drive thought leadership and have more kind of mundane content marketing, is there a risk of confusion if you're having both of those on your channel? Can both those types of content live in the same place and still deliver on your marketing objectives?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you'd streamline them into playlists, make it easy for people to follow. I think the easiest way to think about this is content marketing answers the known questions. So the stuff like you said, how do I implement this SaaS system? What are the top tips for getting started? All of that kind of stuff. That's your known questions in terms of content. But thought leadership, and we don't see this very often, and it's why thought leadership most often fails. What thought leadership should do is reframe the question. It should give a new lens. It has to be an opinion. It has to be, while we're looking at this SaaS system, there is another element that we need to consider, which is the paucity in training, or I don't know, whatever the topic is. I'm just making something up now. But it's really interesting that we know that the Edelman and LinkedIn report that came out this year finds that leaders trust thought leadership more than, say, product sheets or those explainers, and particularly when judging capability of a B2B product. And good thought leadership even prompts buyers to do further research on the product, so it takes them down that bit. But it just doesn't work when thought leadership doesn't help you think differently as a buyer about what you're doing and what you're trying to do. Do you see what I mean? So the biggest challenge is never really where you should be. The biggest challenge in thought leadership is creating good thought leadership, having a stance, educating, but also reframing the questions. Is it that you should be talking about legacy systems, or should you be talking more about efficiency, or should you be talking about, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of debate that needs to happen, and that's what the buyers are really after: the smart thinking, the smart interrogation of their buying.
Okay, so that's really, I really like that. I guess what I'm taking from that is that as long as your approach to thought leadership is robust and is good enough and is playing to those unknown questions and challenging people's expectations and reframing things, then the distribution channel is secondary to that conversation, whereas actually the practical stuff, it has to be where people want to find it, and they do want to find it on YouTube because it's a great way of describing stuff. So it's lovely to just show people something, how to resolve a problem. Okay, so the stuff can live together comfortably. It just has to be segmented properly and thought through. Is there such a thing as ideal length of videos and formats? You used the example of the CNBC or Newsnight if you were based in the UK. Talking heads, people talking to each other. There's different variations. That's essentially one kind of format. We also have YouTube Shorts, where people are kind of are providing 2 or 3 minutes of stuff. Is there any such thing as an ideal stuff, or is it just, it really depends on what it is you're trying to do, and that might change from one moment to the next?
Yeah, it's the latter, isn't it? Of course. I mean, I've seen videos up to 30 or 40 minutes being watched. If they're good enough, if they're entertaining enough, and if you're confident that they will be so, then go for it. But I would basically, in my head, the way I'd look at it is shorts are for discovery and memory. So you're jogging people's memory. Hey, look at us, and for discovery, as in hooking people to watch. And long form in the remit of thought leadership is changing belief. So you're going to want to get really deep into the topic, and shorts are brilliant. They're part of that ecosystem that I'm talking about. They're the springboard that gets people recognizing the name and then wanting to hear more. But they're often done really badly in B2B, which is, they come up with a logo and then, hi, my name is blah blah blah, and nobody cares. So at that point they've just swiped away from your short. So punching through with a hook straight away, which is I've just done one this morning, which is really saying, why is thought leadership failing? That's the first thing they see, because I want to hook them in and I want to get their attention. I want to address the problem that nobody is talking about, that bit. And then I can go on to the, hi, I'm Katy, and this is what I think.
And to me, that's just old-fashioned journalism, right? You put the headline at the front that people are going to read, because otherwise they're going to turn the page and go to something else. It's exactly the same in YouTube or digital media. You want a headline. I guess my personal challenge is whether you go sensational and clickbait, or whether you try and do something that's actually reasonable. That's a conversation for another time, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's a lovely. I still write, because I was taught to write in business by a journalist. So I still write upside down pyramids on all my storyboards. I just can't help myself, putting the whole story in the first paragraph and then breaking it down and getting into the detail. I still do it that way because it's the way my brain functions. So I'm with you on that. I think, no, we don't want to go down in B2B down rage baiting, but we do want to address pain points, and we want to show that we have empathy for understanding that changing your whole SaaS system in an enterprise business is a challenge. It's a risk. It feels scary to those that are in the buying unit. So all of these things we have to acknowledge, and this is where thought leadership can really, really make a substantial difference.
That's excellent stuff. Now, the one thing you picked up on earlier on is actually, and we kind of tiptoed around the edge of this one, is thought leadership often historically comes from a brand perspective. It's about positioning, but we know that it actually can and should play a role in terms of setting up themes and following through, at the middle and the bottom of the funnel. But often, by the time it gets to the sales team, it gets lost, right? The sales team just do their own thing. We've seen this from time to time, haven't we? But do you think that YouTube can perhaps provide another way of dealing with that connectivity from the big idea right down to something which is actually relevant for those teams, or is it just kind of harder to make them do that, and actually the sales team just needs to be in the room with somebody?
Well, you see, I think that thought leadership does two things. First of all, it builds trust, which is really, I keep saying, it's the KPI for growth this year. If not, I suspect for many years to come, because of the way the world is at the moment, we're risk averse, and trust is going to be everything. But I also think that thought leadership is a driver in a way that probably very few other channels are. It's not just a recognition of a brand, because a good thought leadership will change behaviours, will get somebody to say, oh, I hadn't even thought of it like that. I need to investigate this. It's almost above the top of funnel. It's almost saying, you may never have even considered that you need a lead generator, lead enhancer, whatever they call it. You may not have even known that this is what it can do for you. So let me get to that stage where I'm actually talking as though I was talking to a business person, and that then flows into how-tos and more depth and everything else from that thought leadership point and into your sales team, which is, okay, so how do you deploy this, and how many seats are you going to need, and all of that kind of stuff. So there is a process to this, but thought leadership is if you treat it like I'm trying to get people to think in a different way, and in doing so, they are going to see that we are the company or the brand or the product that actually assists this because we understand it. That's where the difference is made. So, I always think too much effort is put into which channel and how it should look and how pretty it should be and what format and what length, when actually what are you saying is the most important thing.
That's brilliant. And I love your point about trust, because obviously this is what this podcast is all about. And one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is trust sounds great. How do you measure trust? Have you got a view on that? And is it often, my typically say, it's something hard, it's quite nebulous, and it's often around brand visibility and it's kind of brand related metrics. Is that true, or is it trust is just basically commerciality? If you haven't done the deal, or you haven't got an opportunity, then the trust doesn't exist.
I think it's a bit of everything, and this is the problem. You need to have a think about, for your brand, your product, what trust means. So it can be your net promoter score, it can be growth, it can also be how many people are recognizing you and saying, you know what, I was hearing Joel talk about this, blah, blah, blah. That's really fascinating. So it can also be almost verbatim quotes. And it's not likes, it's not this glorified reach. It's more about comments and thinking. So there is a structure you can put together about trust. And of course, there are trust metrics you can use, you know, in the old fashioned way when we used to not have social media, which is, you know, asking people and doing surveys and things like this. But it's also about understanding how that pushes through your funnel and what you're seeing raise. And one of the things I'm still super keen on is for people to understand that social is the oil in the engine. And what you'll often see is, yes, you might see, oh, you know, Bob, who's doing a lot of thought leadership on this product at the moment. We're seeing him get some likes, but, you know, well, is it driving sales? Well, I bet you anything you'll suddenly see it in search, or you'll see it in YouTube search, or you'll see it in... Do you see what I mean? So if you're not measuring what's going on around you, you're not seeing the real impact of social media, because that's where the impact is. It could be as simple as your conversion rates are going up.
Okay, it's I guess it does feel like it's underpinned, it's integral in everything. It's not a simplistic binary, this is what you can do. So we've spoken about the fact that we've spoken about the relationship between YouTube and about LinkedIn particularly. We talked about social media. There are other channels. There's more conventional channels like email, like PR, like events. You know, does are the best kind of thought leadership programs? You spoke about social being the engine, the oil rather than the engine. You know, am I correct in thinking that you think these things work better in tandem, they're mutually reinforcing, or is it a case you can put your eggs in a couple of baskets and go, well, you know, we've got it pretty much covered with LinkedIn and YouTube, we can stick with that?
No, I think that's foolish. It doesn't mean you have to put your content everywhere, but you should be monitoring what's going on elsewhere. You should just simply, you know, your email open rates, are they increasing, are they decreasing? You should be measuring across the board. But social has, if you start to think of social as how it impacts other things, for instance, and particularly with YouTube, how you're likely to get picked up in AI search, that, you know, so when you create your video series with your thought leaders, making sure that keywords are being used and that you put your transcript in there, which so many people just don't do. It's such a simple thing to do, but put your transcript in, key points you actually write for YouTube, but you also write for the AI search engines with pithy 50-word answers for every single question. You write for the answer engines, as they say, you know, which is, so if you're not doing that, you're not thinking about the oil through the engine, you're just keeping it stuck in the sump. This is about as much as I know about engines, so that analogy will end there. But that's where it is. It's just sat still. So what's very frustrating to me is that people go, oh, and we should open up this and we should, you know, do this. And I'm thinking, but you're not looking at how it all ties together. And I think that is a really important thing, including your sales teams. So, you know, the amount of times I've seen a series go out and nobody has told the sales team this series is going out. Yet, imagine you have your first call with somebody and they say, we've got this particular challenge with this product or this service we need. And you know it. It could be answered by your thought leader in this video. And it's not being sent to the buyer because they don't know about it. So the other thing is to create a kind of library for your sales staff, for your support staff, for your customer success teams, to make it easy for them to be able to pick up use cases, for them to talk about summaries, for them to do all these kind of deep dives into areas. And it will help you track the kind of things like which chapters people are watching. Are you seeing things being repeat watched? That kind of thing. And we know that above 50% of B2B marketers say video is the highest ROI content type. So, frankly, that's where your investment should be, but it's also about connecting it to everything else around you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so last question then. We've hopefully made a case that YouTube is a really, really powerful channel, particularly as a thought leadership channel. It dovetails brilliantly with LinkedIn, and everybody seems to be using LinkedIn, but it plays a slightly different role to that. We talked about how it can integrate with other social channels as well. But we also know that B2B marketers are time poor and they're budget poor as well. So what's the best way to get started with YouTube? Is it just to go in there and experiment? Is it create a limited campaign? How can you start to understand the parameters of and demonstrate success when you're time and budget poor?
Yeah, I hear this a lot, because it's not even just budget, as you rightly say, it's time. Oh my gosh, getting the time of your thought leaders can sometimes also be, a bit like herding cats. So my suggestion is pick one series, pick one area you want to cover, the easiest area that you can cover, and what we do. Immediate future is try and do all the filming in a day, so that it makes it one day. It's a long day for those responsible for filming, less so but you have your influencers coming in, you do your influencer section, you get your experts come in, they do their bits and blah blah blah. So you plan the whole day out, you storyboard the whole day with the questions that you will ask, whether they're on camera or off camera questions that will then be edited, so that you've got not only maybe say 20-minute videos, which are the depth ones, but also very clear markers of where you're going to be able to cut. So where the question, where the sharp phrase, where the sound bites are going to sit, so that you actually plan the whole thing out. More of the work actually happens before you get people on camera than when you do. So that's the effort. Once you do that, you can video in one day. The post-production is straightforward. I mean, really straightforward, because it's nearly always people on camera. Same day, same presenter, if you're having a presenter, same thought leader running through it. Record it once, publish it many times. And this is where you break the whole thing. You atomize it, as they say, into titles, thumbnails, shorts, reels, you name it. Making sure you have tight intros, 30 to 90 seconds. Make sure you have a very clear chapter structure, that you're writing for AI as well as for the search engines, as well as for people. All of those things. That's where the investment in your time needs to come. And actually you can create these things super fast.
So what you've got there with this kind of discrete series is that you're not committing yourself to always on. You're not committing yourself to creating content in perpetuity, that's the right word, but you're providing people with something with, I guess, a handful of episodes that they can then test and they can understand the benefits of, and then go forward with that and do something better with it. Does it need to have, because often with thought leadership, a lot of descriptions are you actually have a anchor piece of content that becomes a starting point for this, and the interviews of the talking heads can relate to that. Is that essential or a nice to have?
It's a nice to have. I mean, I've seen so many different versions. I've also seen these recorded. You have to have the right equipment, but at live events, and they're fabulous. You need the right equipment so you don't get loads of echoing mess. But with the right equipment, you can do them at events, and they can be almost all over the place, but they're tied to the event, if you see what I mean. So it really depends, because we've got listeners from a wide range of product backgrounds and service backgrounds. It's very difficult to pin this down as to what would work best. The key being is, yes, it's one effort, but it's no bigger than saying I'm going to next year's trade show. It's not worse than, in fact, it's easier than that. And you can actually often find ways in which to make it work around you. The biggest challenge I always see in terms of timing is going, well, how are we going to get people there? Because the old adage, build it and they will come, just still stands. It stood when we first started doing websites in the 90s. It's the same thing. You still have to get people there. And in B2B, you still have to get people there.
Now, I really like the idea of doing stuff at events. I mean, I've taken to do filming at events because it's because you capture an energy that you won't necessarily have in a studio, and as you say, you know people will be there, so you got your and it's enriching their experience, and it's allowing them to be pragmatic. It requires a slightly different setup, but the technology isn't necessarily that expensive, is it? You just got to have the right technology. So it's a really great idea.
And if you're at all nervous, I'd say watch Newsnight. Look at how they do it with their different guests. I know it wouldn't be as punchy as something like Newsnight, but look at the timbre, the pace, the cadence, that's the word I'm looking for, the cadence of something like Newsnight, and then compare that to something like Hard Talk on the BBC. Have a look at how that plays out. Start watching TV as in a different way. That's the way I look at that. How does these, because then, these are programs that have been going for years, and they work because they have a particular format or formula or way of making that work. And that's really what, just sitting there going, oh, that's interesting, they did that, that's a really cute way of dragging us in. How do they do those clips when they turn up on the 10 o'clock news and go, at Newsnight tonight we're going to be talking about, how do they capture your attention? That same thing. So again, back to your journalist roots, really.
It's about experimenting with a new load of techniques and a new load of skills and other technologies, and they're never as quite as daunting as they look like they are. And even if they are, actually there are freelancers out there who can do these things for you, or consultancies, for example, like who can do this stuff for you to help you with the pain of them. So Katy, it's been is there anything we've missed? Because we've spoken about a lot of stuff today. Any closing thoughts of people?
One last thought. I'd say don't boil the ocean. Own your own pond, and know that consistency, week in, week out, saying the same thing. Don't get bored of your own messaging. I know it's easy because you're saying it all the time, but remember, it's quite often new to your buyers. So talking around a topic for a long period of time can feel really tedious to us marketeers, but actually to your buyer, it's not. It's important to them.
Okay, very wise words. Katy, thanks so much for your time today. Always fascinating to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode today. If you have, there's loads more archive content like this on the channel. I'd love it if you could subscribe, leave a like or a rating, and tell us what you think about it. And I hope you can join us again very, very soon. But from me, for now, goodbye and thanks for joining.